One of my best friends today was raised into a freaky Afro-Islamic cult. He and his mom left when his dad was sent on a mission to Sudan. As it turned out, he was sent to fight in a civil war on behalf of the local tribe, cult. They never heard from him again. They assumed he was killed in action. He described his childhood as animal sacrifices, usually goats, every Friday, and he was forced to eat the heart raw and drink the blood, else he would be beaten. The cult owned a house-turned-apartment building in Detroit where he lived, and said that his mother was never permitted to leave the building. He described how female mutilation was mandatory for all girls, which is especially screwed up. Crazy to think of these kinds of things happening in the United States. When he was 8, he and his mom managed to escape the cult by stealing thousands of dollars in cash and fled in the middle of the night, and paid a truck driver to smuggle them into Canada. They stayed in the country illegally for a month, slowly making their way from Ontario to British Columbia, where they smuggled themselves back across the border into Washington. There, they got support from a mosque, who helped his mom set up with a place to live and a job at a restaurant, and helped get my friend back into the school system and back into society. For years, they were paranoid as crap because they thought that the cult was going to hunt them down and kill them. But being dressed head to toe in a burqa has its advantages, I guess. She was able to hustle at the job, and through financial support from the mosque, he was able to attend college, where we met. He's working at a bank now and doing really well for himself. He's getting married soon, and he's fully supporting his mother as well. When I was 19, and by orders of the pastor, my mom took my bedroom door off the hinges. They were doing everything in their power for me not to leave the church. She would do random searches and pat-downs to see if I had any communication to the outside world. There were so many signs that I started seeing when I got older. I was raised into the religion, but I was terrified to leave due to the shunning, the fear, and being ashamed of leaving the truth. Also, my mom didn't want me to go to a therapist, even after knowing I was having panic attacks, because she was afraid that the therapist would take the fear of God out of my life. My aunt became a born-again Christian and joined this crazy fundamentalist church. Within a few months, she had married a man she met there and pulled her kids out of public school and enrolled them at the church's tiny private school. The church doesn't allow women to cut their hair, so she quit her job as a hairstylist. She started wearing ankle-length skirts and made my cousin do the same. My cousin wasn't allowed to wear normal clothes. When we went on our annual beach vacation, my cousin couldn't wear a bathing suit. She had to wear knee-length board shorts and a t-shirt. Joining that church completely changed my aunt's personality. She used to be a really cool person. She would take me and the cousins to do all kinds of fun stuff when we were kids. I remember her being my fun aunt. She was also a talented painter and extremely creative. She doesn't paint at all now. She became completely submissive to her new husband, who is super manipulative and a compulsive liar. I don't think she's being physically abused, but she's not allowed to leave the house alone. She can only go places with her adult son or her husband. My mom tried to convince her to leave, and now she is banned from talking to my mom on the phone unless her husband supervises the conversation. He works from home, so he is literally always around, micromanaging her life. Joining that church also changed my cousin's life. She was probably about 12 or 13 when this all happened. She wasn't allowed to cut her hair, and she was only allowed to wear full-length skirts and long sleeves. They wouldn't let her see her old friends. She was only allowed to associate with people from church. We lived in different states, but we were extremely close, and she used to come visit my family several times a year. Those trips stopped. I could only see her when we drove out to where they lived, and even then she wasn't allowed to be unsupervised with my mom, who was deemed a bad influence because she called my aunt and her husband out on their bullcrap. It was really hard on my cousin. She ended up legally emancipating herself at 16 and moving in with our grandparents. It was an ordeal. The church school she had been going to was unaccredited and essentially useless, so she had to repeat a lot of high school online. The happy news is that my cousin finished high school, went through college, and now she's happily married to a great guy. She's totally normal and super cool. My aunt is still in church, but honestly now that my cousin is free from all that bullcrap, I couldn't care less. I kind of hate her for what she put her daughter through. It definitely really hurts my mom though. She was super close to my aunt their entire lives until she joined this church. Now they basically have no relationship. Their phone calls and visits are supervised by her husband. All she ever wants to talk to my mom about is converting her and saving us from going to hell, even though my mom is a Christian and goes to a normal church every Sunday. It's really sad. I feel bad for my mom, especially since her other sister passed away suddenly a couple years ago. My mom has been pretty lonely. She tells me sometimes she feels like she's lost both of her sisters. I had two cousins who went to Jonestown. I was born 2 years after their deaths, so everything I know is kind of family lore. They were my dad's best friends, and he rarely talked about them, but my mom was pretty open about it. The following is me paraphrasing what my mom has told me about them getting involved in the People's Temple. They joined in San Francisco. It began as a utopian community, which followed the teachings of Christ. They gave literally everything they had away. Blankets, food, whatever the group had, they would give away. At the time, communes were common. So what they were doing, moving in with a bunch of like-minded people, didn't seem that odd. To their family, it seemed like an idealistic hippie community. Then they started asking for money, always under the guise of feeding the poor or something like that. It didn't begin with asking for money because Jim was the second coming. Their parents sent all the money they had, but my cousins just kept asking for more. Eventually, this is how he isolated his members from their family. If the family kept giving money, then the members could keep in touch. If the money dried up, the family was blamed and the members were cut off from contacting them. My parents were living in Seal Beach at the time. My mom says the first time they noticed the cousins seemed a bit strange was when they were on a mission trip with Jones. I believe he was preaching at the Crystal Cathedral, and he brought a bus of his followers down. It rained, like one of these rare downpours in SoCal. The bus didn't have a windshield, so everybody was getting soaked. So Jones walked up to the front of the bus, held his hands, and spoke "Storm, stop!" And the rain stopped. So that was the story my cousins told my parents, and that was the first sign my cousins had been brainwashed. I asked my mom what her response was, and she said, "We just laughed. It was too ridiculous. We had no idea what was coming. No one had heard of a cult." By the time they left for Jonestown, my dad says he knew he'd never see them again, but at the same time he was shocked when it happened. We have letters from their time in the church all the way up to Jonestown, so you can read the progression into brainwashing. In the end, Nancy freely took the Kool-Aid. Ronnie was injected with cyanide. Their deaths have been ever present in my family.